Recording in progress.
Okay, we will call to order the December 13th, 2023. It's a special meeting because it's not on the first or third Wednesday of the month, and we will begin with a roll call.
Okay. John?
Present.
Allison?
Present.
Carson?
Here.
Ward?
Present.
Kelly?
Here.
John?
Here.
Peter?
Present.
And Francie? Okay.
She was going to join.
I thought she was going to join on Zoom too. Okay.
Said she was, yeah.
Okay, great. We will move the first item here on the agenda is going to be public comment. So we'll start in the room. If anyone has public comment in the room, Elizabeth, come on up, and then we'll move online next.
I have a really quick question to start with for staff. Can you help me clarify? I was staring all night last night at the regulations. In an APCHA rental, if there is a couple with a child in a 2-bedroom unit and that child goes off to college, can the couple stay in the 2-bedroom rental if they are both legitimate workers?
Are we answering questions?
It's very unclear in the regulations. So do I need to do a core request for that?
No. Yes, they can. If
They
they're
can,
both,
okay.
if they're both working, definitely.
Okay, great. That's,
Yeah.
that's what I assumed.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a single parent and the kid goes off to college, what happens in the 2-bedroom unit?
The next time they requalify, if the child is above the dependent age, they would not requalify anymore.
Good. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it very much. It's Elizabeth Milius. Thank you. Just really quickly, I know you all are talking about these new regulations, and I just have a couple of comments. First of all, thank you. The eligibility and qualifications for work at home and remote workers, I just want to commend you all for taking this really seriously and making some changes to how those regulations are written and how compliance and everything is handled as far as that is concerned. You know that's been a hot button issue for me for a long time, so I commend you and I thank you. Secondly, I'm just going off of this article today in the paper. Number 6, I just want to make a comment about the employer designated units and moving the categories around. Just have some unsolicited free advice on this, not for tonight, but kind of food for thought, but it relates to this one. And that is, it is my suggestion that we eliminate categories tied to units in the rental portfolio and instead have categories of income so that when an employee makes more money, they simply pay more rent. And we don't have people getting kicked out of units and getting punished for success. It's kind of food for thought for like a work session or a retreat, but that would solve a great deal of problems, not the least of which is this one with the employers. But I think you're doing the right thing here. And the third one is this home trades thing. That's preposterous. I'm so glad you're not going to approve that. It is not this community's responsibility to provide affordable vacation options for people in publicly subsidized housing, period. And lest you have forgotten, Warden John can elaborate on this much more than I can, but the whole premise behind the short-term rental permit and subsequent taxation within the city limits was predicated on the impacts to neighbors and neighborhoods of in and out hotel room type usage rentals of short-term housing, short-term rental situations. Home trades are a little different, but that's just a matter of nuances. So I think it is hypocritical and rich that people in publicly subsidized housing would want to take advantage of this when another rationale for the STR tax and regulations is that these cause pressure on the availability of affordable housing. So I just encourage you all just to steer very clear on that. Again, it is not the community's responsibility to provide anything more than the affordable housing that we do provide in this community. We certainly are not in the provision of affordable vacations for subsidized housing residents business.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Elizabeth. Okay, we will move next. Is there any public comment online? Either we can do raise hands, or if you just want to unmute yourself. Okay, I'm not seeing any public comment online. All right, so we are going to close public comment and move to the public hearing and approval for resolution number 8, series 2023, adopting amendments to the APCHA regulations. Bethany is going to take this one, but before, Allison, did you want to wait, or Allison had some questions that I think she wanted to.
Yeah, I think off the top, my concerns are regarding the fact that we don't have public comment for that. There's one. Thank you for being here and speaking your mind. Public input on regulation changes, and so I had questions along the lines of a board email address we talked about more than a year now. It's come up a couple times. Some way for people online to find out how to contact members of the board, or a all-in-one just board at APCHA. Honestly, I feel like until that's around, we don't have a very good tactic for allowing the public to speak to us and give input at all. I know there's a story in the paper today. I think 8 hours after maybe first learning about these issues is really tight for members of the public to engage. I think having to engage in real time in public for people who aren't used to being in civic situations like this is intimidating and kind of bullies people out of speaking their mind. I assume if anything came through staff, it would have been sent. So staff kind of being the gatekeeper of some of that comments as well makes me uncomfortable. So I think the overarching, there's a Facebook post yesterday. It said the meeting started at 3. I don't think that this meeting had good opportunity for the public to be informed first and then involved. And being that we know that this entity, the biggest negative we hear from the public is how kind of obtuse it feels and how the public doesn't feel heard and that communication is hard. To me, finally getting to regulation changes at the very end of the year and having 0 people attending just shows that we failed on that communication initiative. So I'm definitely happy to go through and talk about the regulation changes. I do have questions throughout, but to me, I'd rather either discuss or not and make a motion to continue the meeting and allow for a legitimate public hearing with a little bit more outreach, having people understand what's being discussed and give them the opportunity to come say what they think next time, or send in emails or something
We
like
did
that.
have an ad in the paper on Monday. We put an ad in the paper with regards to this on Monday. And I'll tell you, being part of the Housing Authority since 1992, we very rarely have ever had public comment for our regulation changes. And it could be that maybe people agree with us, so they figure they don't need to give public comment because they agree with the direction that we're heading.
We hear
don't
people
know.
come and say that they agree. I think filling a room in support is as important. I think the fact that since the 90s we've had an issue of people not being involved in these public meetings is not a reason to say that everything is fine when we hear over and over and over again that everything is not fine, that people don't feel heard, that people feel attacked, that regulations don't always make sense, or you didn't think of their situation and then we're making new regulations. And so if you read the paper on Monday and saw that there is a hearing opportunity, I don't think that the layperson is empowered to understand what it means to come and speak to that, or to go read a 111-page packet and find out if any of this does apply to them and then form opinions and then come. I think that is something that we help bring that information forward if we genuinely want to involve.
This is the meeting where they're going to approve me getting a 2-bedroom, maybe. Not me specifically, but anybody who wants to downsize.
Can we mute Jim's iPad, please?
So between the 2-bed,
Yeah. Okay. Okay, anything else?
So that's just one thing I'd like to put on the table is that to me this feels like I feel like we have not even marinated in enough, definitely not the public, and I'd love more chance to have public weigh in on regulation changes overall.
Okay. Thanks, Allison.
Take reactions to Allison's comments?
Yeah, I think so. Allison had just mentioned this is something she wanted to bring up during her board comments, where we move board comments after the regulation, just to try the regulation resolution hearing, just in order to try and accommodate scheduling.
I'll
So-
hold my comments until our board comments, but I think it is a good idea to have the official adoption, have a public hearing.
We will have that today.
Yeah, that's today, right?
Public hearing and also public
Second
comment.
reading on these.
Right. This is second
There
reading.
is,
We-
there
so
is a
we'll-
public hearing.
We will propose we'll go through the resolution changes, and then we'll have a public hearing on these comments.
All right.
So with that, Bethany, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. I'll just sort of open it up. The board has been through these a couple of times. Is there any discussion on specific regulation changes that we would like for Bethany to highlight? Or Bethany, I guess maybe just for those who are here, if you would just sort of give maybe a quick high-level overview of the changes, and then we can go into any questions from the board and then discussion, and then the public hearing.
Sure. Happy to do that, Carson. Do you want a PowerPoint up or just a
If you've got one,
high-level
go ahead.
overview? Okay, so I have the same PowerPoint that we've been looking at the past few meetings as we've been talking through these. Karen, if you can get to the next slide. I apologize, I'm not in attendance in person, but I will do my best. So the first one we've been talking about is receiving a public benefit and following Colorado state law to allow for folks that are not lawfully present in the U.S. to be eligible for housing. That's based on Colorado law. Nothing's changed between our last two meetings on that one. So the next one is the eligibility. The next slide, Karen, please. That one is clarifying and cleaning up verbiage as to what makes you qualified for APCHA housing. So you still have to work 1,500 hours per year in Pitkin County. 75% of that income must be made in Pitkin County from services provided, from goods and services provided to Pitkin County residents, businesses, or operational institutions. And then a really clear line that says remote workers and workers who work less than 1,500 hours a year do not meet the qualifications of the APCHA program and will not qualify. So that has not changed since our last meeting. I think the first meeting you all had a lot of feedback on, and we amended those. So that has not changed since our last meeting.
Can I ask
The
you a
next
quick-
slide.
Sorry, Bethany.
We're gonna sort of run through real quick. We're just gonna do an overview, and then we can jump in if we have specific questions.
Okay, just in terms of like the order here, when she says page 14,
That's on the rules.
that's on the.
That's on the actual regulations.
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
You can refer
All right.
to the regulations.
Thank you, that's
behind
just-
it.
Thanks.
I apologize for not clarifying that. This one is the continued obligation to keep APCHA informed. Again, this has been in the regulations, not written as is, but just the idea that, hey, if your email changes, let us know. Again, if your employment changes, let us know. We're happy to work with you and help. Or certainly, that idea to just keep us informed. That hasn't changed in all three of these times you've all seen it. If you scroll to the next slide is the verification documents. Again, since our the receiving a public benefit verbiage changed, now allowing for folks who are not legally present in the United States to qualify for housing, we have changed this so that what's required is reflective of that. A Colorado driver's license is required to purchase. It's not required to rent. As a reminder, you need a Colorado driver's license or a Colorado ID card of some sort if you're in the state for more than 30 days. So it makes sense that we require it for ownership. moving on to the next slide, and one is the income calculation. This is the addition that APCHA will determine a person's annual income is equal to at least Colorado minimum wage multiplied by 1,500 hours. As a reminder, that's our annual work requirement. So someone has to document that in order to qualify. Again, that's something that staff's been using sort of as a internal policy, but we're memorializing it. The next slide is employer designated units, which is allowing for a 1 year essentially waiver of the category. Employers, as we've talked about, are having problems putting their own employees in these units due to the category. And so this is allowing an employer to put an employee of theirs in the unit at any category as long as they continue to charge the rent at that category of the unit that's designed, or as it's been approved by either the county or the city. The next one is right sizing, which is changing occupancy to allow for occupancy to be met by the individual downsizing, as long as there's a net bedroom gain from the transaction. Again, that was requested by all of you. Okay, I think we have 4 more. Clarifications to conveyances outside the bid process. This is just very much clarifying that you cannot vest your interest or change the ownership of your property to some sort of trust or corporate entity. It has to be the person that owns the unit. Again, this is policy. It's always been in place, but we're really clarifying it to make it incredibly clear to folks. The next one is the prohibition on home trades on a short-term basis. So staff has recommended this addition that, oh, I apologize, I skipped one. I got a little ahead of myself. Let me backtrack. In complex priority. So in complex bidders can qualify at any category at or above their category. So this is a change that you all requested for who qualifies for in complex. Now we can go to the prohibition on home trades. So again, this is staff recommended that in-kind rentals are prohibited. So that's that. And then the last one is the hearing officer. And there's 2 slides on this, but it's because we're changing it in really 2 different places. But the time that a decision must be written is 60 days is what we're requesting the change be, not 30. As I explained last time, based upon the turnaround time from hearing transcripts that have been requested to be produced prior to the written hearing decision, that turnaround cannot be done any quicker than a 60-day turnaround based upon our third party that we're using to produce those transcripts. So that's there. Though that's my high level overview. Again, this is just aligning the 30 days to 60 days and tying it all up nice and clean and clarifying. Carson, I'm going to turn it back to you. I'm happy to answer any questions. Cindy's in the room and can answer as well. I know Tom's sitting at the table too. So we're here to answer anything we can.
Thank you. Okay, so first I would just ask for any questions or clarifications specific to the regulation changes for staff or Tom.
Do we have to pass them all together as one? Is there an option to peel some out tonight?
You can certainly, as we have the discussion, a motion could be made to remove one or change any of the items.
And then I was looking to have these enacted, not effective immediately. I didn't see any language like that in the resolution, but I guess if that doesn't change, I'd love to know from Bethany or Cindy, any of the things that we're changing right now, are there currently people who are in active adjudication where all of a sudden we would prove that we're right, quote, quote, or is there are there notice of violations that then it wasn't quite clear in the regulations up till now, we are clarifying it and can go back and go get them. I think that's my biggest desire for that delay is that
No.
I know we write these based on experience, right? So if anybody's
No, there are none, Allison. There's no notice of violations out that we would go back and say we got you on. That's certainly not something we've ever done, nor would we ever do that. The idea is normally these take effect the day after they've been approved. Occasionally we've bounced them out a little bit and said, a couple weeks. We've certainly done that occasionally. I think anyone's packet that's currently approved is currently approved. So if someone just submitted a sales application and it was approved yesterday, they are good for 12 months because they were approved under the regulations at that time. It's looking forward. It's not looking backwards. So, all of this is clarification for the most part. There's not a lot of, there's a few substantive changes, certainly in that the in-kind trade prohibition on home trades for in-kind. But as I'm looking through this, the right sizing certainly is a net bedroom gain, but nothing's an I got you in this case. I have to say most of these are very much clarification and not massive policy change.
Hey, real quick on the employer-owned units. That really, that's a temporary Band-Aid for us, but it's really a land use thing with city or county, right?
So I've got on here that.
Correct.
I've got on here that I don't know if it's a non-binding resolution or it's a letter, but I think if we do approve these, I think we also need to do something to the city and the county, just sort of formally stating this is a 1-year fix and really kind of asking the city and the county to look at these because a lot of these, the categories were set during the land use process.
Well, and my only question goes on some of that, you buy a Category 2 unit, you're paying a Category 2 price. Right? And you got your approvals for, whatever you built, whatever you needed the employee housing for. At some point, wouldn't there be a fee, kind of a buy-up fee? I like Elizabeth's idea. We tried to use that with the fire district too, where you were basing people on income and they paid APCHA rental rates at whatever category they were in. But doesn't that kind of change the value of the unit at some point too? Makes it,
Well, the city and county.
So we have not to cut anyone off, but staff does have a meeting on the calendar for early 2024 with the city community development department to just start this conversation of looking at categories of certainly these units. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't think anyone does at the moment, but it's certainly something. Yes, this is a Band-Aid, and it impacts fee and lieu, and it impacts the land use code, and so it very much does have to go to the city and the county, and we are starting that process with the city in 2024.
The idea is to get these occupied by an employee.
Right. Yep, exactly.
Correct.
Good. Kelly?
Yeah, and I've said this before in these conversations, but it's not all that uncommon at the county for, whoever could have transferred ownership over time to have responsibility for these units to come to the county and say, either we don't want this unit on this piece of land anymore, it's no longer appropriate. It used to house staff for someone who lived here, and now we don't want staff, we want it as an extra bedroom or something. So we negotiate whether that's appropriate. Sometimes we decide, great, we don't think this is a great spot for employee housing either. You can pay the mitigation fee instead, so that the housing mitigation is made whole. Or there will be conversations about, we want this to be a Category 4 unit. It was, approved as a Category 2 unit. And then again, we negotiate that and typically make up the difference with the fee and lieu difference between those units. So it's not all that unusual for us to enter into those conversations.
And the city and the county both have their own rental units where people still get qualified through us, and that's how they do it. If that employee is a Category 3, they get charged Category 3 rent and so on. So They don't have a specific deed restriction on them because they're owned by the city and the county, but that is how both of those entities do for the units that they own.
So that might be something we could just do some communications with the owners of those to let them know. I mean, see, I didn't really know that was something that was currently happening, so.
I know that's happening in the county, but I'm unsure if that's happening in the city, but that's something that we can talk about as well when we meet with the Community Development Department.
Okay. Great. Any other questions for staff on this, Peter?
Yeah, I think related to that, I think this all ties back to this challenge we have of having different rules for ownership and rental. So in your example, John, like somebody gets into a category 2 in ownership, they don't have to stay within that income once they purchase the unit. But an employer has to requalify their employee in that unit, and in rental as well. They have to requalify every year or 2 years. So we have 2 different sets of rules, and I don't know how we're gonna have to make it even-handed, but I think there's definitely an issue there.
And I do think some of it's tied to category. So certainly as those discussions move forward, we can, continue those and figure out what it looks like. But again, I think a lot of it ties back to the city and the county in some respects with their land use codes.
Yeah, I think in February, when we get around to this, I want to have these discussions. If you look at the rent paid at the top and bottom scale of a category, that in the percentage of the AMI towards that rent, it can vary by quite a bit. And also the cost of the ownership units can vary by, 65% from one category to the next. So I would like to see.
Or for units next door to each other.
Yeah.
Within the
So
category, yeah.
when we do get into this, and I think we've hit this at a high level, that we should be looking at percentage of AMI as a guidance, and maybe have a target number, and that the rent within a category may not be the same for everybody, that it's a percentage of AMI. But that's just something that, when we come up with this in February, that we can really suss this out. But I think that there are some ways that we can make make it an equity higher, that everybody's paying a certain percentage of their AMI.
You're talking affordability scale, kind of.
Yeah, I think that's an affordability, discussion,
Yeah.
which is definitely on a future agenda. I think it is, as you said, February.
I want to also comment on right sizing. I think this is another example of where this seems like a Band-Aid for the time being to kind of encourage right sizing. But again, we have different rules for ownership versus rental. And I think people in rental are being unfairly punished for being renters and not owners. And I don't know if that's going to get addressed in February by the city, or if we're going to make a recommendation on that, or revisit it. But we talked last meeting a little bit about it, and that we'd have a board discussion at some point.
One way to look at it is that somebody's being punished. Another way of looking at it is that we're maximizing the housing stock.
For rental, but not ownership.
Well, yeah.
So that's
Once-
not equitable.
Well, but
On
the ownership, you are trying to maximize
So sorry,
the
for the
best you
ownership,
can, right?
you're creating an incentive, but you're not enforcing it. Whereas rental, you're enforcing it. You have empty bedrooms in ownership that are allowed or permitted.
No, but on ownership, you could either sit in a 3-bedroom unit with one guy living in it
Yep,
forever,
right.
or you can give him the option to downsize to get my 2-bedroom unit.
In rental, you
right?
don't have the option.
And we have a renter. That's the other part. Control your destiny. I mean, try to own, try to buy. Right. I mean, we've got a program. It's a tight program,
But you
but
could
you
have,
can't accommodate everybody. On the rental side, you're going to requalify every year because that's the program. Should we let? I feel like it's equitable as best it can be, because a rental is short term. It's year to year. You're signing year leases. You got to qualify. Maybe you give them an extra year. I mean, we did some things when income was changing significantly, when people were losing their, lost jobs, maybe got subsidies and during COVID. But rentals by nature temporary, right? It's short term.
I don't think it is. I
Well-
think people in rental housing should feel secure in their housing and not as though they're on a short-term lease. I mean, we have people in rental housing, I'd love to know the numbers, that have been in there 15, 20 years as renters. They've been working in the community, and I feel like they should be treated the same as owners.
And there's a lot of them. But there's also,
Can I just jump in and try to keep us slightly on track? I'm happy to put this on the agenda next year, but I want to focus on the regulations if possible. And Carson, if it's not okay that I'm
No,
trying to keep us back on track, please tell me. I want to make sure we're focusing on what's going in the public hearing and the
Right.
second reading right now.
Brittany, I would like to put that on a future agenda item for discussion. The
We can
utilization.
schedule that for January or February.
Yeah.
Utilization of,
Utilization, rental housing versus ownership. And
okay. All right, so any other questions specific to the resolution number 8, amendments to the regulations?
I don't mean, sorry, John.
Would this be the right time to bring up the yearly, hourly requirements I was talking about earlier?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Let's talk about that in board comments, because that's not applicable to this.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Did you have something?
Well, at another meeting, I'd love to learn or talk with staff how the right sizing works for renters, like if they're forced to move into the next smaller unit that becomes available when, and I asked Matthew, how many people do we have now that the regulations change from dependents age 24 now to 19? How many people are we gonna see in the next year that are getting noticed that they're gonna have to downsize, and what the process is for that?
Okay, so again, that would be board of director comments.
Okay.
So I'm looking for specific questions regarding resolution number 8. Allison.
I'm gonna go in the same order, I think, Bethany, that you did, or I guess starting with number 2. Remind me again, if someone is working, I guess to me, the eligibility is we're getting, I think, what the program was designed for. If someone is working 1,500 hours for a business in the county and doesn't own, within the exclusionary zones. And so some of these things feel redundant to that. And I'm glad Tom's here to kind of clarify how kind of legally in trouble we're going to get. I guess what would be the harm to the program if someone is working 1,500 hours for a company based in Pitkin County and makes more than 25% of income somewhere else also? Like the company is getting that employee, right? Probably several companies are getting that employee filling a job. That job is being done. So I know we discussed it briefly. I felt pretty rushed last conversation about that 75% number, but I guess what's the real life scenario where that actually harms the program?
So just to clarify, you're asking if they work 1,500 hours in Pitkin County, but then say that they worked an additional 500 or 501 for a non-Pitkin
Well,
County.
it's income earned, not hours. I think you could spend way more time in Pitkin County working, making not very much money, and have another thing that you're a part of that you worked a little bit on and made a shit ton of money. You sold one thing in a big market kind of thing. So I know we touched on this before. I didn't feel that was settled, or can we reiterate again during this hearing that the reasoning behind not wanting that employee to be here working anymore, essentially, like you're not serving the point of the housing program when they are doing the things we needed them to do as an employee.
Allison, this isn't a change. It's always been 75% income, at least in my time. I don't know when that got put in, but it's certainly been a very long time ago because it's been in all the regs that I've reviewed. So again, it's not a change. It's not saying that they're not valued. We certainly, though, have seen lots of applications where someone does work that minimum wage job, which is great. It's needed, and then gets a ton of money from some sort of C Corp that they're on the board of, or they are just living off dividends from some, massive, I don't know, account that they have somewhere. So it's not that they're 500 hours in Eagle or Garfield County where they're making triple the amount of money, as Pitkin County is not as well accepted, I guess I should say. But it's the idea that you need to be, your livelihood needs to be in Pitkin County in order to qualify.
I guess I think it's only those people who are making that side money who would ever take our lowest paying jobs. If that's a real scenario, and I appreciate that's what I was looking for, like the real life, when does this happen? I think there's some jobs in this community you can't afford to work 1,500 hours at unless you have some other income as well. The businesses still need those jobs filled, right? So I hear you that it is not a change. It is, part of this that we're talking about that has struck me as, what aren't we getting? Like, how is this harming the program if it is? And I guess, again, I say this all the time, but I think the less regulations, the better, to make sure that we are just playing this out as intended. My question for Tom on this section is, I believe if you are working 1,500 hours for a Pitkin County employer, aren't you not a remote worker? So that part feels redundant, unless it's going to get into the thing where working from home counts as remote work. You don't physically have to be in the office, which is city staff, lawyers, all services that we saw didn't have to go into the office during COVID. And so I'm worried. I would like to use a little bit more time to make sure this is phrased to not overreach on the type of jobs that people are working in Pitkin County.
Well, correct me, Bethany. I believe the reference to remote workers not qualifying, I don't know if we have defined that. We're adding a definition of remote worker there, but I think it's intended to apply to remote workers who are somewhere else and not working remotely from Pitkin County.
Right.
Correct. It was really added
That's not how I
based
see a
upon
remote
what.
worker.
Right.
I see a remote worker as somebody working in their home in Pitkin County that's working for
different than someone
USAA
working
or
remotely in St. Louis.
Then it needs to be. Then it needs to be clarified.
Sure.
I also wonder. We brought up last time. There's a ton of employees right now who are working remote for Pitkin County companies who just can't live here right now. I think the county has employees who are working in Junction. I am wondering how, when we put this in, if they've worked for Pitkin County more than 1,500 hours a year for 4 years, are they then eligible to get in as a bid in the process and finally maybe actually get to move to the community where they work? So again, this just feels rushed to me. I think if we could, not that I absolutely believe that you better be working for a Pitkin County company in order to qualify for APCHA. I think we take care of that by saying you better be working 1,500 hours for a Pitkin County employer. So I'm afraid of over-regulating that redundant sentence without really getting there. And I'm asking for a month, or I'm asking for one more meeting where we get it right.
Well, let's address the procedure question.
Yeah.
You have a lot of options here, okay? You can approve what's on the table in whole or in part, right? You can cut and paste. You can say we're okay with this, we're not okay with that. You can reject in whole or in part. You can table in whole or in part. If you decide for whatever reason, either because a rule hasn't been vetted well enough by you, or you want to extend more opportunity for public comment, you can continue it for that reason also. So it's wide open. It's what the majority of the board wants to do as far as how you take formal action on this. So do you agree with Allison that a particular provision needs
Yeah, Yeah.
modification and you're not prepared to wordsmith it sitting here today, you can say, I move that this one be taken out until we can look at it deeper.
Okay.
So it's up to you. It's not, I can't give you an answer that is cut and dried about the process because you have discretion, okay?
Yeah, Allison, I think the crux of your questions are, I think, benefit to the community versus the amount of money somebody earns being a benefit to the community. And that if you wanted to have further discussion, you could just move to have those 2 bullet points pulled, or that whole section pulled, like Tom's saying.
And I hear what Bethany's saying, that this is more like what just happened, that there's some things in the regulations that we can put off for another meeting.
So bear in mind,
but
if
that
you-
specific, I think, sentence, I will. I have a couple more questions throughout this resolution,
bear
but
in
I
mind,
think
if
I
you
will.
pull the change on that, you default to the current rule and you still have the same issue hanging out there.
And it's the same
So
thing. We'd still be doing it the
it's-
same thing.
It doesn't change
No,
until
it
you
doesn't
change
change
it,
what we do.
you know.
So it's better to continue our table, you're saying, while we work on that language?
Well, if you want, that's your call. I'm just reminding you that the current rule will
The current-
not give you what you want.
No remote worker is allowed to live in APCHA right now, as it stands currently.
Correct.
We do
Right.
not allow that, so I'm
Right.
not afraid
And we're just
of
trying to
having
make that very,
stand.
very clear. And so if we need to finesse that a bit to make that very clear.
Yeah,
Do you-
that would be one.
Have there been people that have applied that are remote workers that have objected?
No,
Dan,
because they don't work in
Yes.
Pitkin County. Oh,
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah,
yes.
but I mean, they've objected to
But
the
we've
fact
said
that
that-
we've not approved them. Yes, all the time. And folks that just sit in their house and work for different companies that don't need to be in Pitkin County. We see it on I don't want to say a daily basis, but certainly a couple a month where we have to deny folks and they fight us on
rule's
it
working.
tooth and nail that
Rule's
they
working as
should
it is, yeah.
get
We-
to live
we
in our
had an
housing,
we
even
had
though
an-
they work for J.P. Morgan or out of New York or McKinsey and Company. We've seen all these big companies where these folks have chosen to live in Aspen and they think they qualify for APCHA housing. So it is a request that we get this sentence in here so that we have something to point to. I agree, it seems a bit redundant, but we are tasked with telling these people no, and when we say no, they go to city council and they go to the mayor and they go to Matthew and everyone else they can possibly find to listen to them because they don't like what we've said. And so the idea of having a sentence in here, yeah, it helps. It helps our frontline qualification staff be able to point to something. It might
1,500
be
hours.
redundant, but there's a lot in the regulations that are redundant.
Okay, I appreciate that, Bethany. I'm still, I
Don't we
request
deal with
longer.
your scenario of somebody working for a company, Pitkin County, City of Aspen, and they're working from home today, working in, say, Glenwood Springs? Don't we deal with that with employer located in Pitkin
Exactly.
County?
That's right.
So they would still qualify
Right.
after 4 years or whatever it was to be able to, hey, I want to move to
Yes.
Aspen, I want to get in the program. They still qualify. But we deal with that. It's the remote worker that doesn't really work here.
Kelly?
So, I only want to table items that we have a very clear, honing in of what is problematic. So, I've heard 2 things. One I think is easier to figure out. Another one is more philosophical and might require conversations that go beyond this table. So related to remote workers, like, we absolutely have to have a definition. Like, I
I
don't
was
see
wondering if
how
that's in the
we,
glossary, yeah.
I don't see how we move this without defining that. I think that definition is easy enough to do. It can be as easy as someone residing in Pitkin County and not providing 1,500 hours of goods and services to Pitkin County residents, businesses, institutions, I think is the language that we use. So I feel like we could possibly sew that one up tonight. The other one that you've raised, Allison, that I'm not sure there's consensus at the board, and I think if we're going to table it, need to have a clearer path on what we hope to achieve, is related to that question of income that you raised.
And I'm fine with that being a 2024 philosophical
Okay, 'cause,
conversation.
you know, I mean, I raised it before, you know, I think like of, you know, Andrew, who I adore, who works for APCHA, qualifies for APCHA. So he sells like some symphony or something and makes like, you know, this once in a lifetime boon, you know, like, you know, is that something that doesn't benefit the community, that should be held against people? I'm unclear how frequently,
I think
you know,
his
are we?
assets might kick him out of that.
Maybe, well, but not for, maybe, perhaps, you know? So I guess I'm, that one I think, like, we would have to really drill into a little bit more. You know, like, is it, like, what I raised before was, okay, say if I make 30% on selling art, you know, does that outweigh, you know, my day job of 2,000 hours bartending, you know? So I think that one just isn't as clear here, and I'm not sure the board has consensus in drilling into that question. If enough people around the table right now are like, we're good, we don't need to talk about this more, it's clear, then we move on.
I'm
right?
fine with moving on with it. I mean, in the interest, I guess, of passing or having some sort of motion on the regulations at hand, I would very much, if I make the motion or someone else does, request that we define that remote work way better, because we are adding in something that is redundant but is a bigger hammer than the nail we're trying to smush. So moving on.
I would recommend adding the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, which definition of a remote worker, and we can add that in. It says defined as a flexible work arrangement in which an employee is scheduled to perform work at an alternative work site and is not expected to perform work at the office on any sort of regular basis.
That would
or
cover
reoccurring
half of our
basis.
workforce, though.
Well,
It needs to be clear.
Real quick, Tom.
Just to say that with the qualification, that the reference there is to that remote, it means outside of Pitkin County.
Right.
As an
Which is
additional-
not even allowed anyway, so, yeah.
But like Bethany said, we had to litigate an enforcement case where this was exactly what was going on.
And I promise you that will happen again, even with this. I'm fine with it being there. I like the idea of adding that definition, and I'm ready to move on. Is that helpful to you?
But if you're remote, meaning not in an office, and that remote location is in Pitkin County, there's no problem. If the remote location is outside of Pitkin County, that's a problem.
What about the employer?
The
No,
employer
yeah,
is
that's what
outside.
it is. It's
Right.
where the company is stationed.
Well,
If the
if it
employer
says
is
worker,
outside,
that's not the
Just get
employer.
everybody in on it.
Well, your problem is with the external.
Okay.
Well, so
it felt rushed to me, and
Remote
that's my comments,
employers
and I'm
can
happy
be
to move
okay,
on.
it depends. Do they have an office here? And is the work being performed here? So-
Half of them are not. I mean, half of them, like, I think that
Okay.
is a bigger discussion. That's why that particular sentence, being that we are able already to not allow people in the system as written, that to me, I hope that we get more time to work on that. I have two more questions based on
So,
what's ahead of us.
I'll just weigh in on this. So
Okay, good.
I will say, for me, I think that we could come up with endless scenarios of what if and how it might affect someone. I think this is currently written is written to address a lot of the remote workers where we are seeing people who do not work for a Pitkin County employer. They've moved here, as they said, they have a job, they think they qualify. For me, this gives staff something to support. And I don't think that there's a perfect solution with the majority of these regulation changes. I think that there's trade-offs where there's no way for us to make everyone happy and solve every problem. And at some point, we have to sort of weigh both sides and make a decision. And I will say, for me, I'm prepared to advance this tonight.
Carson, you could easily fix this consistent with what you're saying, and then you can come back with it and get more technical later. But you could, for now, you could say remote workers whose remote location is outside of Pitkin County.
Whose employer is outside
Whose employer is
Not
out.
necessarily the
Okay.
employer. It's where they're doing the
No.
work.
No. And if
This
we're not in
says
agreement-
remote worker. That's a worker, not an employer, right?
Yeah, so I think if we're not even in agreement right now, this is moving just a little too fast, because that is not what we are looking for in the program. We are looking for the businesses of Pitkin County to have a workforce who can be here and do their job. And so where you are employed, where the employer has their business license and their physical office has always been what we've gone off
Employer
of.
located out of Pitkin County is addressed in the second bullet point.
I think all of this is already addressed, and we
Well,
are.
but the other one is 1,500 hours providing goods and services within Pitkin County, less than 1,500 hours, do not qualify.
I would like, if we're gonna move this, I would request to amend that language you just read to mimic what is above that says provided to Pitkin County residents, businesses, and operational institutions.
I think the perfect solution
Just
here is just
clearer.
defining it correctly, so that it's not open to. What this could get to is the language that we're hearing of some jobs here actually don't matter, and we should probably kick out the people who aren't directly serving the tourism economy or the very specific things. We can start picking and choosing, because I think what we saw during COVID was that a majority of service and professionals, including doctors, including so many things, were able to not have to leave their house physically to do their job, and without being a little more careful about this discussion, that is going to be this fell swoop of the current workforce. So, definition would be a really good start in my book.
Okay. Other discussion?
I'm just trying to picture Kelly's suggestion. Right, I'm trying to read it how it would word, because I think that's a good suggestion, right? And it's kind of doubling it up, but I think we deal with the remote worker. We've defined it fairly liberally, but also clearly that you got to provide work in Pitkin County. You got to
Right.
provide services, goods, whatever you want, however you want to word it. And employ. That's what really matters.
I tell people that if you do not physically have to be in Pitkin County to do your job, you do not qualify.
When you've got
If you guys
architecture
want to open
firms
it up and just let us
that hire in Denver.
prove anybody, we will do that, because it seems we keep getting further and further away from what
Cindy, you don't
our
have to
program
physically
is
be here.
about.
I mean, like most professionals don't physically have to be here and deserve to be here and are making the city run. So I think you're hearing it wrong. That
The
we want more.
employer is
Yes,
here.
yes, correct.
Their employer is specifically here in Pitkin County,
Right.
paying Pitkin County taxes.
Great, but the employee might not necessarily have to be at a physical location each day, and I just want to make sure that's okay. in
Well,
our
I think that
regulations.
this definition states that, as long as the employer is in Pitkin County. And
You
they
got
have to
architecture
physically.
firms that hire people in Denver. There's 2 of them in town. They have offices in Denver. They hire junior architects. Architects want to live in big city. They want to, it's a little more affordable, whatever else. But there's a couple of them I know that local kids grew up here. They love to move back to Aspen at some point, work for the firm they're working for. So to me, they're qualified. Today they're living in Denver. They came back to town, had a job working for that firm. They eventually qualify for the program. But I don't really know where I was going with that. But ultimately, I think we deal with it with the 1,500 hours in both places, providing goods and services, and
Yeah, I agree.
and I just assume, if we want to clarify remote worker down the road, we can, but you also want to be able to give a hammer or a tool.
Yeah, I think
what we're asking for.
I think we've discussed this one. I think we know where everyone stands. Let's move on to additional points of discussion.
I have a clarification on the right sizing. This will hopefully allow more people to participate, right? This change, because we're switching to net bedroom gain, not maximum occupancy plus 1 previously. If people aren't coming with a match, do we have ways of prioritizing who goes in? I since this actually could allow for more empty bedrooms than the previous pilot program, which was unsuccessful, so we're willing to do that. If 2 families come, and again, like one's gonna have empty bedrooms again within a year or 2, would they be a slightly lower priority than the family who comes who would occupy that those bedrooms longer? Is there anything like that, guard railing, now that we're kind of opening it up a little bit more?
Yeah, we have a Google spreadsheet right now with everyone that's signed up, that's interested in actually the program, and no matches could be made. So if this goes through, what we'll do is go back into that spreadsheet, and obviously it's the person downsizing that I provided the options as to what was available from an upsizing perspective. So what were the available units, and it was up to them to choose whether they wanted more information and would like to reach out to that person. There's still not a ton. I mean, I had a few people wanting only one property that they were willing to downsize into. So I don't think I'm going to need a priority system. But as we said originally, when that got passed, we'd come back to the board if there was more demand than the 5 that were allotted in the pilot program. So I think we've only successfully done 1. There might be 1 more after tonight, depending on if this passes or not. So we still have 3 available. And I think I only had 1 other individual interested in downsizing that had signed up. So
that's helpful information. Number 10, prohibition on home trades on a short-term basis. This to me specifically is such a good opportunity for APCHA to kind of earn some public trust and do a little bit more outreach. And so this is the one where I feel like I absolutely do not have enough information. What scares me is that I believe this came about because people called APCHA curious if it was allowed. I think it was discussed among staff that it didn't sit right. It came to the board, it doesn't sit right. But it scares me that there wouldn't be a little bit more information collecting out there, or that we wouldn't leave it to zoning and STR laws. This isn't part of STR right now, but definitely like HOA. It seems like a really good opportunity to not quote, because this is what we hear, get someone in trouble who is trying to do the right thing. Like, what if the next time someone's curious if they want to do something, they don't ask APCHA because APCHA was like, no, you can't do that, and just makes a rule and doesn't do the full kind of swath of community. So I don't like the way the policy came about and would feel more comfortable if it was vetted a little bit more. Again, I don't think it harms the integrity of the program, and that you in order to be in the program, you have to work 1,500 hours for a business in the county. So if you are gone and your unit is either empty or occupied, it's not typically a 1-for-1. I think it's more of an exchange. How is that hurting someone else who wishes they were in housing but can't? You were going to go on vacation either way. I do believe that visitors within residential zones has its own thing, and I'm really open to that. Like, I think I'm undecided on this, but feel uncomfortable with.
Feels like if you had to call and ask if it was allowed, you knew it wasn't.
Yeah.
Carson, can I comment on that?
Tom.
A home trade, that's not a legal term. A home trade is a lease. All right? If I say to you, you can come live in my house in Carbondale and I'll come live in your place in Aspen, I'm leasing my place to you and you're leasing your place to me. The consideration is just not cash. It's the right to use the other person's property. But if you're living in my house with my permission and I get something for that, which is living in your house, that's a lease. You're renting. Okay? It's just rental for non-cash consideration. So you have to be careful about that. I'm not trying to dictate policy here, but what I'm saying is you want to make sure you're not being inconsistent with the rental policy, which is addressed in the rules now. And to me, it would make sense to be thinking about this as to whether or not it's inconsistent with the rental policy.
And that's Tom's legal opinion is the one we've applied when this has come up.
Yeah.
And so this, to our way of thinking, this is not a policy change. This is just clarifying in the regulations. So, we can just say, sorry, that is not approved. That is not valid.
Now, I'm not saying you can't decide in your discretion to make an exception from the rental policy for home trades.
But
That's
that
up
would
to-
be a policy change.
That would be a policy.
This is
change.
not a policy change.
And you need to understand, this is a type of rental, and so people who are told they can't rent for cash might say, well, you're letting somebody rent by moving into their house, what's the
Not
difference?
moving in, but I do appreciate your legal opinion and this perspective. That, yeah, I think we feel in our gut, but again, I think it's the procedure of entering new regulations, and that feels very staff admin, not community based, which is just like.
And it also, of course, intersects with city and county policy on short-term
That, and
rentals,
that's
which
what I'm
is
also
another-
wondering. I feel like I have more to learn. Like if the laws and HOA provisions are already covering this, are we the kind of organization that just adds extra stuff into every
I can't
more and
answer
more?
that.
Yeah.
I can't answer that question.
You know, a lot of this, you're saying that staff's adding it in because you called, and so we're just trying to be harsh. A lot of it's that I don't have somewhere to point to that specifically said this. And so no matter how long I talked to this one individual about the fact that it wasn't allowed and used Tom's legal opinion and whatnot, I still got pushback and I still got yelled at because I didn't have something to point to. And it's not a great way that we have to keep shoving things in the regulations, but it's the way we have to go because we need to be able to point to something. And if it's
Clarifications
not
are,
written,
clarifications are
people don't-
cost effective. Let's put it that way. They're cost.
it's a clarification. It's current policy, and we're trying to clarify it so that we have something to point to the next time someone calls.
I'm not opposed to this being redundant or repeating it in our regulations, but Bethany, couldn't you point to the short-term regulations and say, it's not zoned for short-term
in the
rentals?
meeting.
We don't enforce zoning, so.
We tried it.
We
we've
can't
tried.
enforce
I
zoning.
don't know what else to say. We've tried. If folks don't like our answer, as I've said a couple times tonight, they just keep asking and they usually start yelling. And they go to other people. So I don't.
In that case, it
I'm
would
gonna
be up
stop
to the
there.
city or the county and not us, if it's a zoning question.
I mean, in the spirit of the board supporting staff, this would be very useful because it's just clarifying something which I'm not hearing a lot of arguments about. So, we would very much appreciate just this short declarative sentence saying no, rather than us having to say, well, our legal opinion is for these.
I'm fully supportive. I think it's just not, it's not the intent of the program. And combined with Tom's interpretation of it being an in-kind rental, to me, it's clear as day.
I think that APCHA staff are working on the most important aspect of our community and have the most difficult jobs in this community. That is twice during this conversation that we're putting stuff in so that because people get mad when they hear rules or because then they'll go to the next person. And I do think that no matter what we do, that's going to be a part of it. And I'm so glad that moving forward, I think the culture of the office is going to be to get more resiliency and professional support in how difficult the job that you do is. And I believe that with my whole heart that this is the most important job you could be doing in Aspen. I think the regulations have to be bigger than who is working in the office ever at any given time. And so that just struck me that twice now we put this in because people get mad at us, and even though it's already in there. And so to me, that sounds like it's just really hard to get to say the same, to bang the same drum, even the correct drum all day, every day is what I'm hearing.
I'm gonna move to approve the regulations as presented in our amendment. I'm gonna move to approve The APCHA regulations as presented in our packet tonight, pages 4 through 8.
Resolution number 8, series of 2023.
Resolution number 8, series of 2023, adopting amendments to the Aspen Pitkin County Employee Housing Regulations.
You have to have a public hearing.
Yeah. So
Yes,
we
you
can
can-
have
that's
a-
okay, the
right.
motions-
We can have a motion, and we can have a public
You
hearing.
can have
I
a
would like-
second, but you can't vote until you
Right.
hear from the public. Yeah.
I would like to request a friendly amendment of John Ward to amend the language of remote worker to add goods and services provided to residents.
Sorry, I missed that. Please amend my motion as requested by Kelly.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a motion from John, and that's a second from Kelly with an amendment to the remote worker definition as previously outlined.
Can we have discussion?
Okay, and so then now I would open it up to public comment. If there is anyone that would like to come forward and speak, we'll start again in person and then move online. Looks like Elizabeth is up. Go ahead.
Just really quickly, clarification. One person you didn't talk to, Jackie, in compliance. I'm sure if you ask her for some help with that definition of remote worker and whatnot, when she's having to deal with these issues case by case, she can probably help you with that language. Let's make it easy on her. Let's make it easy and idiot-proof for people who are looking at those regulations online. And let's make Bethany's job easier. I know it sounds redundant, but listen, if somebody's going to look for a little crack in the system, believe me, they're going to go to the ends of the earth to find it. So if we have to write it 6 ways to Sunday, let's do it so that it's clear and so that we can apply the rules fairly across the program. Thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Any other public comment online? If so, just please unmute yourself. I see we've got a couple people in here. Not seeing any public comment. Okay, so we will close the public comment. Allison.
Tom, I think we cut out with you last time and didn't hear the answer to number 11. We're changing the hearing officer deadline from 30 to 60 days. I think that makes perfect sense based on transcripts and just the process back and forth. A number of times at this table, we've asked that language change from shall to must. And so to me, knowing that that's been an issue and come up several times, concerns from the public, for us to actually end up in the end allowing the officer more time, but not going on the side that we believed was the correct thing to do, which was to say the must is an odd move on our part. And can you just clarify what that language?
Well, I mean,
Well,
this
so-
is funny issue on that because as was as staff argued to you when this came up in an enforcement case, the law is pretty clear that when you have deadlines that are specified in a rule, but there are no consequences associated with that deadline, it's not a requirement, even if it says shall. And that comes from the U.S. Supreme Court all the way to the top. And every case I've ever read follows that rule.
And we interpret it
So-
that way
Shall
as
or
well.
must.
Huh?
Shall or must, right?
Well, I will tell you that the word shall is much more common in laws and regulations than the word must. Frankly, I never see the word must. I understand the point of putting that in here is to make a change. But to me, if you want to make a change and say that if the hearing officer doesn't make the decision within the specified period, the hearing officer loses jurisdiction to make a decision.
Okay.
That's the sentence I'd add to the rule.
Okay. So
Rather than get into the difference between shall and must, I would make a direct statement about whether or not you intend to affect the hearing officer's jurisdiction by, if the hearing officer doesn't make a decision in time.
Okay.
Because otherwise, you know, the law is what it is, but you do have the discretion, even though, I mean, the Supreme Court doesn't eliminate the discretion of the legislative body to make a deadline enforceable. It just says that if it doesn't specify consequences, it's not enforceable. So if you want to specify that consequence, I would say so directly rather than get into whether it's must or shall. That's my recommendation.
Thank you.
We do have a motion on the table, and so that is a roll call
Wait,
vote.
did you close discussion, I
Noel, you
guess?
can make a motion to amend.
Okay. We do have a
You
motion.
can move
we
to
have,
amend the motion.
We have a motion and a second on the table.
Correct. And
Oh.
then someone, or there may be a number of them, you can move to amend that motion
Okay.
by changing this provision. If, and
I
that
don't have
requires a
I
second.
don't have an intention of doing that. I just had that question and one more question left on the regulation,
Okay.
but the motion happened before my questions were done. Can I ask it?
From a procedural standpoint, I
To ask a question?
yeah. Do we continue discussion or
Yes,
if
yeah,
there's
a motion
Yeah.
and a second does not cut
Okay.
off discussion on the
Go ahead.
motion.
Bethany, just that final one on trust there, that was just cleaning stuff up, or there's now, I guess just, can you clarify elsewhere in the regulations, does it say what kind of, information would need to be provided, for those exceptions to be made?
Yes.
Okay.
But now that this issue has been brought up, the one we were just discussing, I think there should be some consensus on the board as to whether you're trying to change the policy or not. Because if we leave the rule, the written the same, and but there's an intent to do something different, it hasn't yet shown up here clearly. So I would rather not have to argue about it again in the future, because it's
So
certainly.
go back to that loss of jurisdiction.
Huh?
Go back to the loss of jurisdiction,
Okay,
right?
the concept would be that.
What happens at that point? We start from zero, like we talked about before? Does it then come back to the board? Or like,
Well, that's the that's what's.
because ultimately, we're just trying to set our hearing officer up for success, because
That's what's problematic about the whole question, okay? Which is, okay, the hearing officer doesn't make a decision in time, but that doesn't make the underlying dispute go away.
right.
So, my reading of the cases is that that's what's written, that's what's between the lines in these decisions, is that, well, wait a minute, if we're not making it go away, what's the point of saying that the hearing officer loses jurisdiction if he's just gonna start all over again, right?
Well, part of this is punitive to the hearing officer too. Like, if he can't make a decision, or they can't make a decision in 60 days, or get to a point, and it drags on and on, they're billing us whatever else. What's our contract look like with them?
I mean, there's also maybe a compromise position on this, which is that, to the effect that the hearing officer shall make the decision within the 60 days, unless extenuating circumstances make it impossible for the hearing officer, or difficult for the hearing officer to do that, in which case the time is extended. I don't know.
I think the
But
60-day
what I don't
window
like, I just
makes
don't want
clear.
it to be ambiguous after this
I
hearing.
get but I also don't want to lose jurisdiction. We invest time in this hearing officer, right? They bill
Right.
us by the hour, whatever else. To me, there's
Leave
got to
it
be
the way it is.
punitive to the hearing officer, where,
Leave it the way it is.
you stop
that
paying.
You can
You
leave
stop,
it.
because what are they gonna do? You didn't make a decision. I'm still gonna
But-
get my bill, and I just won't come back the second time.
So my advice, if you don't want to make a change, then if you say, you could say that the hearing officer is encouraged, shall we say, or directed to attempt to make the decision within 60 days. I
And
mean, that would be most consistent with what the law is.
Ward.
Yeah, John, I think what we're looking at is getting performance out of, what we're looking at is getting performance out of the hearing officer. We hire the hearing officer, we can put those expectations on them and leave this policy as it is. We have the flexibility of hiring or using a different hearing officer.
No, I'm not suggesting, I mean, the loss of jurisdiction, the punitive stuff, take away. 60-day window, I'm fine with that. We gotta have some date in there to get the data or get the decision. But it's managing that hearing officer to make sure that, hey,
So let me say this, since this issue has come up, our hearing officer is meeting the deadline.
Right, that's what I was going to say. That has not been an issue
But
subsequent
you're
to that.
absolutely right. You can decide if someone is being you can decide, look, we're just not happy with the fact that the hearing officer is taking too long to make these decisions.
Can I also just
Hire a
remind?
new hearing officer.
Can I just remind everybody why we're asking for the 60 days, and that is to get the transcript, to make the excellent decisions, and we have not had problems getting decisions made in time recently. So I just want to clarify that.
I'm comfortable with it as written.
that's what I was kinda arguing for, like, make the change, you're poking the finger in your eye as much as anything.
Right.
So do you want it to change shall to, or is it to advise to make a decision within 60 days?
No, I think it reads fine to me.
So you're gonna leave shall and not change it to must? I mean, I think that's legally better.
Great.
I'd like clarification on Kelly's friendly amendment, adding, you could point exactly to where that's being added, so it was the goods and services to people living in Pitkin County, or exactly what
So-
was the?
As I understood it, Kelly, and I'll repeat it and then you correct me. Kelly was asking
Sorry,
for
let me get back to the page.
the bullet point that said, goods and services provided. Let me find it. Provided to Pitkin County, amend remote workers and workers, and change the definition to provided to Pitkin County residents, businesses, operational institutions.
Could you pinpoint that in our
It's
page 25?
From section 1 eligibility, it's page 14 of the actual regulation, 25 in the packets, where it is a bullet number, or a bullet under section 1. Remote workers and workers who work less than 1,500 hours a year, providing goods and services to Pitkin County residents, businesses, operational institutions do not qualify.
So we would strike that and replace it with the sentence above.
Okay.
And we'll know where to put it.
So it would read, remote workers and workers who work less than 1,500 hours a year. Providing goods and services to Pitkin County residents, businesses, operational institutions.
Yes.
Do not
Do
qualify.
not qualify.
Do not
Do
qualify.
not qualify.
Correct.
And we'll add a definition of remote workers somewhere in our glossary, or
I don't think that that's currently been proposed.
I think we need to. I just don't think we have fashioned that definition yet.
Well, Bethany read one that is, there are out there. I mean,
well, my
I just
favorite.
Googled it. You can find large institutions that are in the business. They have definitions for these things. So
I think if we make that definition, we say people who are working in jobs that they do not physically, like they can be scattered or do not physically need to be there for companies outside of Pitkin County do not qualify.
So
be careful. 'Cause
can
you
I
have
propose, I'll read this again if it's okay. Remote work is defined as flexible work arrangement in which an employee is scheduled to perform work at an alternative work site and is not expected to perform work at the work site located in Pitkin County, at any work site located in Pitkin
But
County.
we're not, like, this is separate from what we're talking about
Right.
tonight. Like, we're gonna add this next month,
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
Well, this isn't anything to
So
be in
this is
the
something we
rule
don't
now.
even really need, we can craft and.
Yeah, let's not talk about that now.
I think I'm hearing that there's a problem with working for an employer located outside the county, but that's not the case. You can work for an employer located. Right here, employer located outside Pitkin County, if 75% of your
As long as you're
goods
providing
and
goods and services
services are
inside
provided
Pitkin County.
In here, yeah.
If you're a trader, a day trader trading stock for Schwab or whatever.
that's a problem.
or
however,
you're a phone
exactly.
call operator
If
for
you're-
USAA making phone calls and
What's the
and selling
scenario
insurance
then?
all day.
What's
If
the
you're
scenario?
if let's say you work for an architectural firm that's offices in Denver. If you're in Pitkin County providing goods and services to Pitkin County residents and businesses,
Well, it's a bank. You're
You're
a bank.
okay.
Your bank's
Or
headquartered in
it can
San
be a bank.
Francisco, Wells Fargo, and you're providing services. That's different too. But
and so it's important to always think, all right, who's our target here? What's the universe of people we're trying to provide housing for? And that sounds like somebody you're wanting to provide housing for. Person is here working as part of the community for people who are located in the community. Doesn't really matter if their head office is in Washington DC or not. They have a little, maybe they're working out of their house here. But the goods and services are being provided locally for local people.
Yeah, if you're doing a job that provides services to people that live in Pitkin County and your boss or your employer moves their office to Glenwood Springs, you haven't changed what you're doing for Pitkin County. It's just that
Correct.
the address has changed.
If it sounds to me like we're hoping to have more tweaks on this, which would be 2 readings again in the future, I guess, and see, to let you know, and I don't feel like I need to make a whole motion about this and try and get people on my side, but I will be voting no because it makes more sense to get this in with the correct definition in the correct way at that time instead of put a couple of pieces of this off for 2 readings later. So I'm excited to continue working on this.
Okay. We have a motion to approve on the table with an amendment as outlined by Kelly. And it is a roll call vote.
Okay. Kelly,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
Allison,
No.
John.
yes,
Okay, motion passes, and we will move to the next item on the agenda, which is the Board of Directors' comments, and Peter, we'll start with you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Matthew, for moving the compliance report to the front page of the website. And it's good to see the updated report from November. We talked last meeting a little bit about this, but with the BG3, Burlingame 3 closings happening, can we start to learn where the new owners have moved from?
So if we have a request for specific data from staff, I'd like to at least hear from at least 2 other board members to ask staff to go ahead and do that. So is there any, I don't know if there's any further support for that?
Well, I think as those from other APCHA units become available for sale, that we'll see that.
Yeah.
I
The-
would like to
Okay.
know that.
Great.
It's additional work for us, I just want you to know.
The city of Aspen set a requirement specifically wanting people who work in the city to know. I feel like there were larger policy conversations about this housing development that would merit understanding where people are moving from.
And the qualification was a priority to people working in Aspen,
Right.
not where they lived.
Yeah.
We also talked, maybe last meeting or the meeting before, about self-employment. And again, I sort of have a request that we learn how common self-employment is, to see if it's disproportionate to, I don't know, if it's more than a trend, I guess. So that's something I'm curious data-wise. And then wondering when we have an update on the affidavits, where those stand, and an update on the audits.
Very shortly.
And then is just a question, I guess, for clarification. Is there a difference between the information being asked for with the owner audits? Is it different than the requalifications that renters go through? It's just a question I have. That's it.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I've been asked by our mayor to see if there was any support for lowering the yearly hourly rate
So the number of hours worked.
per year, yeah.
Any other, I mean, that's, as I've said before, that's not something I would support. So I don't know if anybody else has a different opinion, but
Did he tell you why?
He thought that 50 hours, or I'm sorry, 30 hours a week for 50 weeks was too much, I think was his reasoning. He thought it should be lower.
Tori and I have discussed this. I think you and Tori have discussed it, and I think I brought it up here before too. But one of his objections was that you work for somebody, say, the Jerome Hotel, and they close for 5 weeks.
Right.
And you may not be able during at some period to be able to work the full 1,500. But I think his desire was to decrease it to 1,400. And if there's interest in having that discussion at the table, we can put it in a future agenda item.
Right. Well, as an alternate, I'm not really going to weigh in on it, but I would point out that I learned recently while I was at a conference in Vail that their requirement is 1,560 per year. So
And Snowmass
anyway.
Village just increased theirs,
To what?
1,600.
It's also, it would also be interesting to think of the fact that if you're filling the units with a requirement of 1,500, do you want to take units away from people who work in 1,500 in favor of people who work in 1,400?
right.
That's a great point.
And we take into consideration if it's an odd time of year where one specific, like a hotel, because they're doing more of a major remodel, if they're closed a little bit longer, we take that into
I mean,
consideration.
if the mayor's example, you know, you can assure him that that isn't happening, that kind of example is not happening, if that would be
I'll
helpful
relay that
to
him.
him.
Thanks.
I'd wonder if those employers were giving any paid time off.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
that
Right.
you would count that in your 1,500
But
hours
that
anyway.
kind of thing, that scenario is not happening.
I agree.
I don't have any comments tonight, except for to wish everyone a happy holidays.
Thanks.
Beat me to it.
Or
Peace on earth, goodwill to men.
Allison?
And women.
I thought that there was support, but I'm happy to re-bring it up on some sort of contact information on the website for board. Do you have thoughts on that?
I thought we had a discussion with Tom
About what?
that it didn't work. Let me go back with Tom, and we'll, rather than
What
talk
now?
about it now, I'll pull up some
Contact-
old emails.
Contact information for board members.
But I thought Tom told us it wasn't a good idea, but let's not discuss that now. Let me double back with Tom and get back
I
to
think
that.
you can have contact information. I would want an APCHA email address.
Yeah, I think that was the,
I don't know
But
that
you can't have like
Oh,
a
maybe-
mass email.
We
that
don't-
everybody-
I
I don't think I have a
publish
find
them.
on this, but
okay, maybe I'm
you
imagining.
can, I mean, I would certainly say it shouldn't be personal contact information if you can provide
But it should
everybody
be- it
with
can't
an
be a
email
mass
of
email.
But
this.
Tom,
everybody's
I
on
thought
it.
there was an
That's
issue,
just
like,
one meeting.
when does that become
mass
public
email
comment?
where somebody sends something to all of
Yeah.
them.
Oh, you're talking about
With
the
it-
fact of
Yes.
people
Yes.
commenting?
Right,
Yes.
right.
All
Right.
Yeah.
It was that, it was your
I
problem
thought
was
you
saying
meant
that's,
I thought
that's
you meant
not a
the
substitute for
contact
public
information.
comment like this.
I support Allison on this. I think it's easy to get allison.bektash or abektash@apcha.org email address, and then have those available to the people easily so that they can give you feedback. I mean, the website goes down 3 pages to get who the current board members are, but no phone numbers or email addresses. So I support, I mean, it's for 5 email addresses or 8 email addresses, whatever, and that's the expense of that is minimal.
You know, the
My
city
opinion was
runs,
that on quasi judicial matters,
Yeah.
which essentially means enforcement cases for
But-
all intents and
Well, you
what
have to be-
happens to the public comment at aspen.gov? How do you guys, if someone writes to that, how do you guys get that
Well,
directed to you?
We get it in emails, but we have to be careful, and we would have to be careful to replying to more than one other board member, but that's,
We already are. I mean, using our personal emails now, it's not like we've never talked to each other. I think we all know the rules and are careful.
but,
I wonder if we could actually just still use public comment at aspen.gov as contact on the
Well, I would
website there, and they
strongly
could forward it to
recommend
us.
that, and one reason is, in addition to not mixing your personal and business, when we get car requests are increasing astronomically every year. People want more and more information. If you have a separate account that's your APCHA email account, it's really easy if you're contacted by Cindy to say, give me everything you have on such and such. If you have all the business on that APCHA email account, it's a lot simpler than having to go through all your, either your separate, private business or your personal.
yeah, just have everybody use
Preferable.
your apcha.org email address.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely support that.
Okay, we can,
Well, yeah, I mean,
I have issues with that, but I won't.
I mean,
comment.
yeah, I mean, so I created one specifically through Gmail
With all the
specifically
city
for
I
that.
think
So,
it's
I mean, I
purposeful.
will say I'm not
Weighing in
really
on
looking
everything
forward to
we do.
having
Now
another
we're gonna have
email
every single board
monitor, but
weighing in on
Well,
everything
you
we
could-
do.
Switch everything over.
Can't we just
Yeah.
have one that's a list and it's still
mean,
our
the way that
personal
it's
email
working now
addresses
is-
in in APCHA, APCHA at Aspen .gov, and it
Just
just
like county
goes to
commissioner.
our board.
Don't the county commissioners have the separate?
Yeah, we have a BOCC
Yeah.
at Pitkin County
Right.
that
Right.
just gets forwarded on to my Kelly.McNicholas
Yeah.
at Pitkin County, and that's, you just plug in whatever email you're using.
and then you
in that
literally can't
list.
reply all, which is nice. I did want to hear your thoughts on this.
I would prefer not to, actually. I just don't think it's a good idea. We already have 10 elected officials that are inundated with every time we make a decision that somebody doesn't like. Now we're gonna have 15. And after a while, it weighs on you. Because nobody supports us. And it's just gonna be 5 more people who are not gonna be supporting us.
But that's not gonna, I mean,
That's how we feel. I'm
right,
sorry,
but I'm
Tom,
saying,
but that's how
why would
we
it be
feel.
different than now? They can find somebody if they want to, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get
Yeah, I mean,
emails all the time about
I-
apps.
I've received a number of emails that are forwarded from Matthew or Cindy or Bethany, just please forward this to the APCHA board.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that happens on a regular basis. I don't know.
Put on a future agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can talk about it.
Because obviously we have some differing opinions on that.
At the very least, I'm happy to have my email that you all use for APCHA business put on the website for people to email me. Then
Yours
happy
are
to-
on there because you're an elected official.
It's not.
It's not
On the website?
It's not on the
On your
APCHA website.
website?
It's on the BOCC
No, it's not on ours,
website.
but it's on
Right.
yours.
Yeah, but then someone has to go look for it.
Yeah. I thought we had yours on ours as well, but maybe we don't.
How about this? Could you maybe come back to us with 2 options, 3 options of we could do it this way, or this way, and we can just pick which way we want to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
I'm excited to talk about affordability, thanks for bringing that up, and was really, really, really close to voting yes. I think we have good changes made today, and I just really want to get definitions down. So I like working with this board.
John.
Happy holidays.
So I would just say, I mean, I think today was at the end of a months-long public process. I mean, we've been talking about regulation changes for a long time. I know, Allison, you disagree, but we've put notices in the newspaper. We've had numerous meetings. This is it's got to be at least the 4th or 5th meeting that we've talked about it. There was a newspaper article. I think the fact that there's not public comment here in person is evidence that these are common sense changes that strengthen the housing system, and people have better things to do with their time. And I think that's the reason that we didn't have any comments tonight. So other than from Elizabeth, who agreed with all of them. So that's it for now. So we will move to executive director's comments. Matthew.
Hi, everyone. I'll keep it pretty quick. I'm meeting, well, all of us are meeting tomorrow with a delegation from a nonprofit from Lahaina, Maui. They're very interested in our program. We're going to be sitting down with them for a couple hours tomorrow, and there may be a more formal delegation coming in March with some of their elected officials, but we're just going to be telling them all about our program. And then we've got ComDev coming in and Pete Strucker from the finance department. So we're looking forward to that. We're going from 9 to noon tomorrow with them. We sent out our first check for the pilot program, for the essential repairs pilot program. So we're excited about that. And then I just wanted to mention Jackie's going to come back early in the new year and give us a more full description of the audit program, but so far she's sent out since July 80 audits. 74 came back clean as a whistle, and she's working on the other 6. And there's 2 or 3 which seem that there might be an issue, but maybe not. So it's a very high success rate. And then also going back to Peter's question about the affidavits, which are due this year, we've sent out another reminder. But rather than what we did 2 years ago, which is follow them up relentlessly, separate from the separately, anybody who doesn't get us their affidavit in by the end of the year is going to be up for an audit by Jackie. So we will just folding it smoothly into an existing procedure, which I think is a much better way to do it.
So do you have a rough count of the number of?
I don't have that with me right now, but it's it's not huge. But we're just those people are just gonna go straight in for an audit for cause, which seems like the best way to do it.
That's great.
And that's it.
I think that's fantastic. Okay, Cindy.
We're not going to be listing anything new this week, but we will next week. They are resales from units that people want at BG3. We are moving forward with closing on BG3. Right now, I don't know how many I know Pam's been busy at closings all week, and I think part of next week as well. So we are moving forward with that. There is more coming up for sale. So just remember to look in our on our website. We will be having next week or next Friday it will come up, but there's somebody who took advantage of the right sizing program at BG3, closed on BG3, and his 3-bedroom single family home at Woody Creek will be coming up for sale. So he took advantage of that ability to get it what we call like an in-complex bid because he was right sizing. So he was a single person who was fine with the 1-bedroom, and we're getting a 3-bedroom single family home for that. And that's going to be listed next Friday. Yeah. So we were really happy that worked out really well for us. Rentals, again, I believe we have some still rentals. So again, people, please sign up. Get on our Notify Me on our website.
Great, thank you. We'll move to the consent calendar. We have one item, minutes of the November 13th regular meeting. Discussion, changes, or motion to approve?
I move we approve the consent calendar.
Okay. Motion from Ward, second from Kelly. And this roll call?
John?
Aye.
Allison?
Yes.
Carson?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
And Kelly?
Yes.
Okay. Andrew, third quarter HomeTrek report.
Good afternoon, evening, almost evening. It's almost 6. So I know we're pretty far into Q4, so I'm gonna keep this one pretty brief, knowing that you'll see me in I think 3 weeks. So with this one, just because of the timing, I did keep it pretty standard to what you have seen before. But I am, now that I have, almost 9 quarters worth of data. Since we've started getting really solid data within HomeTrek, we're going to start looking at it in more longitudinal view, just so you can see trends across the board rather than from quarter to quarter. So just as a heads up for that, I know this looks pretty similar. And then one of the things you'll also see in the end of my report, Matthew shared this with you, but the 2023 workforce housing report. So I just have a few slides on that just to kind of clarify some of the data in that, because I know when APCHA received it, we had a...
I have one copy if anyone wants it,
and
but
I
it's
have a
pretty
copy
big,
if
so we
you
didn't
need
print
one
it
as
out.
well. But there were some data points in there that I know when APCHA looked at it, we had a few question marks and then just had to dive into the data to see kind of what they were getting at in that particular one. So let me share my screen. Right into it. All right, so inventory increased by 82 in the last quarter. Now, the vast majority of those are those 79 units at Burlingame. Within that, we have 69 units that went through the lottery process already. There are still 10 units. 5 of those were held by the city, and those are going to be used for city purposes, so they will not have a category assigned to them, but they will be for city employees. And then the other 5 were 5 3-bedroom Category 5 units that we just did not see the interest on them. So City Council, I think last month, a few weeks ago, had adopted a resolution to recategorize out of those 5. 1 will be a Category 3 3-bedroom, and then the other 4 will be Category 4 3-bedrooms. So we are expecting to see, we want to let those other 69 close and kind of see what the churn within the system from those 69 units are going to be before we advertise those additional 5 units. So there will be an additional 5 3-bedroom, 1 Category 3 and 4 Category 4s coming up in 2024 for Burlingame 3.
Hey, real quick, total inventory decrease, is that type?
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I did not. Apparently, I will make an edit. It increased.
First typo I've ever found, so I don't. I'm a big picture guy. I don't.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'll send out an updated version. I think in my actual report booklet that you received, it does say increased in the actual report booklet, but apparently not on my slide.
New math, John.
It is, yeah. And then the other 3 units to get us up to 82. 1 was a unit purchased by the city, so again, it's going to have a city designation on it, not a formal APCHA deed restriction on it, but that's out at the ABC. And then we had 2 ADUs that weren't previously listed in the system. So as expected with Burlingame, we saw a lot of applications come in. We had a total of 766 that were reviewed during quarter 3. That's an increase of 424. So our qualifications team did a lot of work during Q3 to make sure that we got through those applications and people could be able to bid, especially on those Burlingame units, which is what drove a lot of that demand. With more applications, we're going to see more denials. We did have 215 more applications denied than in Q2 and 209 more applications approved. The next slide will break down kind of where that is. That is all applications, long-term, tax credit, seasonal, and ownership. And that for our rentals, that does include both new applications and requalifications in there. So this is just a large number of every single application that came through during Q3.
I think it was Allison that made the comment last time we did this, that the year over year might be more helpful than the
Yes.
previous quarter.
Yep.
That'll come.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Now that I have, like I said, now that I have 9-10 quarters worth of data, I can start looking more long term and see if we see any trends there. So looking at that breakdown, light blue is approved, dark blue is denied again. Within those, just looking at the long-term approved, we had 116 that were approved, of which it was a pretty even split of new and requalifications. 85 of those long-term rentals were denied. I do have a list of denial reasons in here as well. We do see a lot of denials within the tax credit, and a lot of that is meeting the income restrictions on those units as those come available. In Q2, we had a lot of low-income housing tax credit units, the LIHTC units at Truscott Phase 2 and Aspen Country Income available. So as expected in Q3, when they actually were offered the unit to go through the application process, we saw a lot more denials in there as well. Seasonal rentals, we had 118 approved, 56 denied. And then sales ownership, majority of which were approved, 253, only 15 denied within Q3. Denial reasons, and this is not limited to one of these, it could be a combination, being under the occupancy limit for rentals, being over the income limit for rentals or even for RO. Well, there isn't an income limit, but they were over the asset limit for it. Temporary legal status in the country at that point in time. Unable to prove full-time employment, unable to verify income and or assets. Some others were not replying to unit offers, missing the deadlines to provide documentation, being offered another unit, or 75% of their income not being within Pitkin County based off our regulations. Any questions on the approved denied qualifications within Q3? Again, most of this you've all seen, but it's just a different data point. So looking at APCHA managed units, we did have Q3 is always a busy time for us, as that is Merle move-ins. So we did have 196 new and renewal leases. However, if I take out Merle Ranch from that, they accounted for 110. You know, we still saw about 80 plus new and renewed leases from T1, T2, Aspen Country Inn, and Smuggler. So that would be about 250 units if we take out Merle. 56% of our inventory had a new or renewed lease. If I take out Merle, only about a quarter of our inventory saw that. Not many move-outs. We are seeing a lot of renewals with regards to rentals.
Is there any other, you have all this data now,
Yep.
I guess in the future you'll be able to tell us like, hey, this year we're seeing a lot more people renewing rather than new leases, like,
Yep.
just,
So you want that broken out, or are we looking? Would that be helpful to the board to see how many are new leases compared to renewed leases?
you described the churn in the system and just some data point to say we're seeing a lot of churn or we're seeing a lot of people continue to be renters, and I would also love to see like what's the average renters stay. Is it like a year? Is it 10 years?
Sure, and just to quantify that, when someone moves from one unit to another unit, that is considered a new lease. It is not considered a renewal. So that is going to skew the data a little bit, especially for tax credit purposes. If they move buildings, it has to be considered a brand new move-in date for the low-income housing tax credit rules we have to follow. So yes, but again, just be aware there's going to be some skew in the data there just based on how the system functions.
Okay, I'll stop after asking this question, but do we know what the average tenure of a owner is in the system? Like, we know 20 years work history is the average work history for a lottery winner, but do we know how long the average person stays in their housing?
Again, I can show it from in current HomeTrek data based off the current unit they own. We have how long they've owned that unit for.
Okay.
And if they've sold since HomeTrek has started, we also have, that data as well.
Okay.
Is there a way to track non-lease renewals from units not managed by APCHA?
Not necessarily, because if they're within that 2-year qualification period and they're on lease term number 1 within that 2-year time period, we don't talk to them again until year 2. So if their lease does not get renewed after year 1, we would not know unless that unit now has a new person coming in for qualification. And since we are not the property managers, we do not get to dictate whether they're deciding to offer that lease. The only thing we have any say in is, are they qualified per the deed restriction on that unit?
So Ward, to your point, we wouldn't know if there's more churn in the privately managed rental units versus the APCHA managed.
Yeah, and reasons why leases weren't renewed, I guess,
Yeah.
is information that we don't have a right to, I guess, but curious about.
Yeah, there's nothing in the deed restriction that, dictates that they have to
Right.
tell us their, non-renewal lease.
I think this goes
X
along
reason.
with the with the discussion that we had about a rental list, right? It's the same sort of issue.
There's a bill being introduced this session at the state level that would not allow you to not renew a lease without a reason, which I think, should that move forward, would impact this community a lot.
What are the likelihoods of that getting through? Pretty low?
I'll report back once the session starts.
I would be interested to know that, because
Yeah.
especially one specific project, because one specific project, it's on a whim that the person just decides not to renew after somebody's been there, and it's like, oh, I'm not gonna renew your lease, I want to give somebody else an opportunity.
I don't think it's cutting edge. I think other states have these.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I think the,
If you've paid on time, you haven't broken any, it's protecting sort of that person.
yeah.
And the
it's my
federal
understanding that-
rules, if there's federal involvement, you basically, if you keep your nose clean, you've got a perpetual lease.
But as I understand it, in Colorado, those rules favor the landlord, not the
Right.
tenant.
Correct.
Although that's been changing in recent years with some pro-tenant legislation, but I don't think they've gone so far as to address this question.
Can you keep us posted on that?
And then with regarding maintenance requests, 250 total, which is a decrease from Q2. Again, makes sense as a good number of those Q2s were make-readies from the end of the 22-23 season for Meralt before the music school moved in. Breaking down a little bit more by property and where these new and renewed leases are coming from and where these move-outs are coming from is listed on the screen for you. Again, highest percentage being Meralt in terms of new and renewed leases, as our lease terms start September 1st.
Do you track, to our earlier conversation about people making more money and then kind of not having housing because they can no longer requalify? Do you have anything that shows how many people are moving up within the rental system from a category 2 to a 3 to a 4, moving within the rental system?
Not in that facet, but we do have data on their specific qual case that states, they get an additional year to come back into compliance. So if in their requalification time period in which we give them 150% on the current income caps to requalify at, so if it was 100,000, they get up to 150,000. If they're still over that 150,000, we give them one more year to come back into compliance. So it is not just a non-renewal of lease during that requalification period. It is, we will give you an additional year in which you have to requalify in 1 year compared to 2 years.
But let's say they don't want their income to come back down within that category limit.
Yeah.
Like, do they then get priority to move to a higher category rental unit?
Within the APCHA system, I don't believe we have
It's really
trans-
hard,
yeah.
because the majority of our units are, the maximum
threes.
is category 3. We don't have a lot of category 4 rental units, and that's where a lot of people are probably moving is higher than the category 3 up to category 4. And we don't have the category 4, we just don't have a lot of them. Centennial's category 3, Castle Ridge is category 3, Truscott is basically category 3 or category 2, and Aspen Country Inn is basically
There's a small
category
number of
1.
Cat 4s and ups.
Yeah.
Peter, can you and I have a discussion offline on this? Because we've been kicking around some ideas.
Okay, great.
And the other thing to your point there is we don't have any, again, since if it's privately managed, we can say, hey, this person will not requalify for a Cat 3 unit. There's a small number of Cat 4s out there, Category 4 units out there, but that property manager does not have to offer that unit to that tenant if they don't want to.
And
The
you
pro-
never change the qualification, you give them 150% of their income, that allowance.
Of the category of the unit.
Of the
So it's
category.
based off the category of the unit.
Does 150% of income take you from a category 3 to a category 4?
I mean, that'll be part of the discussion on AMI,
Yeah, on the
breaking
AMI,
down the
then, yeah.
bands.
I'm not
so
sure. I'd
Yeah.
have to, yeah.
Yeah.
we can pull up the bands.
I don't have the
and
chart
show-
memorized,
yeah.
sorry.
No, okay, I was just curious. That was why it was,
Yep.
the rule was made that way.
And so, a few things on move outs. I did pull out some of the move out reasons. We did have 12 during Q3. 2 of them were transfers, so to other units within APCHA management. One was moving out because they had issues with management and or maintenance of the property of the unit. 4 of them purchased a home. 5 are other category, meaning they fall into one of these, moved out of state or relocating, moved to another deed restricted unit that's not APCHA managed. 1 ended their lease with a city unit because the city does hold some units at Truscott for city employees. And then we have 1 that stopped paying rent and left without notice.
We're pursuing that one. Let me assure you.
Am I good to move on?
Please.
All right, so then this is the units that were available during Q3 that had submit interest. I know you've seen this before, but just the highlighted are the numbers of those specific categories and bedroom types. So we can see the average for, our low income category 1 was not average, but it was 33. And then for our studio, that's has an income limit of 60,780. We had 52 people submit interest for that. For the Cat 3s and ROs, those were all for Truscott Phase 1, so those aren't low income. Those are based off our Category 3 income limits. And 2 bedrooms and studios, we saw a lot for studios because that's the only bedroom type that has priority for single occupants, or a single person household. In a 1 bedroom, a 2-person household and a 1-person household have the same priority in terms of meeting occupancy, whereas studios have a additional priority for just a single person. So we always see a lot of interest on our studios. I did ask property management, our studio Cat 3 and our studio Category 1. So Truscott 1 studio and the Smuggler studio. They're still working through the sign-up list at the studio for the Category 3, as we do have to go through based off who has the longest work history. And as we go through that, some people may have already found housing, or they're, what they're looking for has changed. And then we went through the list on the studio Category 1, and it has since been relisted as we went through all 33 and weren't able to find someone who met or who wanted to go forward with it.
Okay.
All right, getting into lotteries. So again, as expected, with Burlingame 3 happening during Q3, we saw 51 listings, 39 more than we saw in Q2. We had 2,100 total bids during Q3. That's 1,735 more bids. 75% of those bids came from households with 0 dependents. 25 total lotteries, 13 more. Out of that 25 lotteries, and that data point was not updated. My apologies. Apparently I did not go through this enough. We actually had 13 of those 25 households that were current owners. My apologies on that. And out of that 13, 11 were current APCHA owners, 1 was a free market owner, and 1 was in other deed restricted housing. So my apologies, I will update that. And that it should have been 13 winners were current owners. We did have 0 in complex, as Burlingame did not have any in complex, because until all Burlingame units sell, Burlingame 3 will not have any in complex because it's not a completed project at this point in time. We actually had a decrease in work history from Q2, and I think it's due to the sheer number of lotteries that we had. It went down to 15 years, so it's still quite high. That was the average work history for winners, whereas in Q2 it was 20 years. And I think in Q1 it was about 22 years. So it came down a little bit, but I do think that is because of the sheer amount of units that were available. Had 22 units close, 0 Category 1s, 2 Category 2s, 6 Category 3s, 7 Category 4s, 1 Category 5, and 6 ROs. If you do need all that, that's in the report booklet, the full breakdown of all of these. But what that worked out to is an average sales price of $419,913 for all 22 units. In the report packet, I do break it down by category so you can see what the average sales price for each of those categories were, because I think that's probably a more indicative number. But based off the 22 that we had close in Q3, we're at about 400,000. And then this is the breakdown of these 2,100 bids by category, bedroom, and household size. So we can see the largest number came from our Cat 3 and Cat 4 units, but I also put in parentheses how many units were also available in those categories, just so you can have an idea of where those 800 bids were going for. Number of bids by bedroom in this case, we actually saw the most for our 1 bedrooms. Even though our 1 bedrooms were not the largest share of units here, and there were 77 units total. I know if you're looking at that, you're going, well, you only said there were 51 listings. Please remember that some of the Burlingame listings had multiple units, so that we were not doing 69 or 74 separate lotteries in that case. And then this is the breakdown by household size. Again, we can see the lion's share were from single adults with 0 dependents, 1,151, and then the next largest percentage would be 2 adults, 0 dependents at 432 out of that 2,100. I did pull some averages, and I was doing some comparing from previous quarters, and this is what I want to start showing in future board reports is some of those comparisons. Even though we had way more units, the average number of bids was about the same, or from previous quarters with even less listings. So 1 bedrooms typically average around 40 bids. This was 43. 2 bedrooms averaged 20 to 30. This was 25. 3 bedrooms typically average about 20. This was 19. No 4 or 5 bedrooms. We did have a 6 bedroom. There were 18 bids on it, and we had 1 studio with 38 bids. Yeah, any questions on bids? Otherwise, I'll move into some information about the workforce housing report. It's a lot of data to digest.
I have a question about the inventory.
Yep.
The 1 unit that moved from the ownership number of units increased by 1 because of 400 East Hyman. So that was a rental unit, and it became, or it says.
So it was an ownership / rental unit, meaning the deed restriction allowed it to be either or, and we clarified the deed restriction on that one. That was 400 East Hyman A301, and the new deed restriction states it's only an ownership unit.
Right.
So it was just clarified from the previous deed. It had a new buyer.
Okay. And then the other units, which is 111, what are the 100 units of that 111, say, ownership and rental?
I live in spreadsheets, so my apologies. So this is the breakdown of, and I will make this a little smaller, meaning that way I can zoom in and up. So those others, those 111, encompass those 100 units that can be ownership or rental. I don't feel comfortable labeling them as ownership or rental based on how the deed restriction is written. So that's why they don't fall into either or. They're kind of both.
Okay.
And then the 11
example of that. What's a unit that is?
What's the one, Cindy, right under First Bank or over by First Bank by City Hall here, where if she's occupying it, it's an ownership unit, but she could rent it out and not have to occupy the unit based on how the deed restriction is. Okay. So we have about 100 of those, or 100 of those listed in the system. And then the other 11 are music rooms over at Merle that are non-livable space, but we do collect rent for them, so those are included in the APCHA APCHA total number list there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so moving, if it's all right, I'm going to jump onto the workforce housing report. So I wanted to pull, just give you two things to consider here. Where these numbers came from. So this was pulled from the U.S. Census Bureau, American Community Service, based on 5-year estimates in 2021. And then they listed that, so that I pulled that right from the report. So if you want to go to that website, which I did yesterday, just to verify some of that data. What I tried to do is make a comparison, because that 2,303, which is what the report states is the number of deed restricted units within the city of Aspen. I couldn't find that number or anything within my reporting. So I did look at Q4 2021, and when I reported to you all, it was about 2,357, and it's not that far listed from the 2,303 that they list. So this wasn't sourced directly from APCHA. So if you do look through this data points did not come from, or at least these numbers did not come from me.
So there's, the U.S. Census Bureau counts the number of deed restricted units somehow independent from APCHA?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and when it says latest 5-year estimate, I couldn't get a definition on how they do their estimates. Do they anticipate we get X number of additional units every year, or what is that estimate based off of? So I just wanted to put this out there, so if you do start looking at some of those data points, they are different than presentations in terms of APCHA number of units that I've presented previously.
All right, sorry. But there's also deed restricted units that APCHA does not count in the inventory, like Phillips and...
Correct, but this is within the city of Aspen.
Okay, so the count is different.
Yep. One thing I also wanted to note is that 2,357 that I presented included all of the seasonal rentals. And the next point is we define residency based on occupying the unit at least 9 months a year, or depending on the deed restriction, at least 6 months a year. The report does not state what time frame is considered owner occupied as full time. Is that 6 months in a year? Is that you're registered to vote? Is that I couldn't find anything specifically in this report packet of what they're considering full-time. So with that in mind, here are some of the numbers that they gave us. So they said within the city of Aspen, there are 5,872 total livable units. The greens are the ones that are occupied full-time. The yellow are the seasonal or vacation rentals, or vacant units, I think is the term they used in the report. So this is just showing that out of that, 44% of the units within the city of Aspen are not occupied year-round. 56% of those units are occupied year-round. 987 are free market, meaning there's no deed restriction on them, and 2303, which again is the number from the report, are the deed restricted units.
Sorry, can you go back through that again?
Yep.
987 are free market.
Occupied full-time, based off whatever their definition of full-time is.
2303 is...
Restricted full-time, because we require full-time.
And 2582 is seasonal or part-time. Right?
I'm just not sure this matches up with like
I don't
our
think
com
it's-
dev
I don't
and
think it's right.
assessors. And
Well,
like,
so-
there's like 13,000 units, and like total in the county. Like,
Why we
that's
started
not,
digging into it is
we had
there's
that
This is
same
city of
reaction.
Aspen.
Yeah.
This is city of Aspen.
I know, but
not the county.
but there's going to be more in the city than.
There's
No,
one
not- and-
specific bullet point that made us dive into this, and it is they quoted as 70% of occupied units are deed restricted. Based off their math here, which if you take into consideration 987 and 2303, that's 3,290. 2303 is 70% of that. So what they're
Is this coming
saying,
from census data?
yeah,
Like, so it's who they talk to.
I mean, the total is off, but the percent that's actually lived in probably is about right, like 50-50. Do you think that is right?
I don't know free market, the total number of free market units. That's not where I work in. So
We at the city have been repeatedly told that 68% of our housing stock is not lived in year-round.
Yeah. I could believe that too.
I wonder if the, fractional ownership stuff gets really weird.
I'm wondering,
So-
yeah, if like the Gant is
You know,
considered
Well, and that's,
residential.
they
Yeah.
don't,
They get
they don't
counted
give a
as
great
residential
definition
units
of what
in
is
our
considered full-time here.
Inventories, but.
I mean, if nobody's clear on it and there's different sets of data and the city quoting one thing and the census another, I mean, would the elected officials be in support of doing a real census or something to actually know what the real inventories are?
So, I mean, I'd be happy to sort of pull up our latest ComDev reports and send those out. We did protest some of what the census found in this last go-around, but not so much based on this. It was like they just missed entire neighborhood census blocks.
And there is information on Pitkin County in here as well, but they don't list anything on the number of deed restricted units within Pitkin County. They have a section on Snowmass, but they didn't combine Snowmass with Aspen with anything that's outside or, the non-incorporated areas. So, reason why I wanted to go through this is we had some question marks when we first received this data, as well as so I just did my best to try and figure out where some of these numbers are coming from and at least try and give you a comparison based on what I have available to me.
But the dark green, the number of deed restricted units.
Correct, but that does
But
not
not the
match up
light
with
green.
what I had, again, it's based off a point in time. I don't know exactly what point in time they pulled that from. So the closest comparison I could give you is from Q4 2021 because they said it's a 5-year estimate based on 2021.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in support of figuring out what the real data is. What is the city and county, do they just sort of?
I mean, we rely on our
ComDev.
ComDev and assessors data, which is,
Okay.
very accurate, but it doesn't interview at the household level the same way as census does, right? So we're not interviewing people whether they live there full-time or not. And there's proxies for that information, but they're not always good proxies.
But John, you were saying there's a 68% number that ComDev quotes as
Being second homes.
second home. So
yeah.
they're interviewing people to get that
I
data?
think that's utilities data, isn't it?
I think some of it does come from water use
Mhm.
and some other sources that they glean that information from.
Yeah.
Okay. I won't take up any more time on it, but
Yeah.
I would love to learn.
And again, that wouldn't be as applicable in the county because most of our units are on wells.
Right.
So you have to answer it different ways.
Thanks.
That's right.
So I just, wanted to share that with you because we did want to share the workforce housing report with you since we had received it, but we wanted to do a little diving in before. Not that I'm protective of data, but I also want to make sure data is used correctly.
Yeah.
So that report's, don't look at it.
You can look at it, but
I can give you numbers on APCHA program inventory.
thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to keep it moving right along to approval of 2024 budgets.
Can I ask one more thing on this? At some point we talked about a dashboard for the homepage. So rather than 25-page reports, we have something that people can glance at occasionally and understand how the inventory is working and what efficiencies there are, or, APCHA only manages this many number of units. Where do we stand on board support for that?
It's in the work plan, so we're planning to do it.
Okay.
It's in the work plan for next year. I don't think we've really done anything on it yet. We've been busy with building M3, but it's in the work plan, so.
Okay.
We'll
Great.
work on it.
Right. Great. Okay. Matthew, are you doing budget?
Yeah, we'll do it together.
Cindy?
So the budget, it's broken down by fund, so it's a little confusing, but then on Cindy's, we also did the screenshots of each individual fund, but I can tell you, generally, it's very comparable with what we had last year. There are two specific increases, which are the new position, which was approved by the city and the county for the community engagement, which is going to be working particularly on HOAs, and then also the money both bodies put aside for the home, the essential home
Grant program.
grant program. Sorry, thank you. So, in addition to the subsidy from the city and the county, APCHA receive, we do get money from sales, application fees, etc. We get a management fee for city managed units, and we also get reimbursement from the city for certain maintenance payroll taxes. So that's the people actually maintaining the properties that we manage. So that's a little bit more money from the city, separate from the subsidy. The overall budget is, the revenues are expected to be $3,306,970, and the overall expenses are $3,541,813. But what you're seeing is the operating budgets for the individual units and the individual funds. So that's a slightly different number, but that's the way it's been broken down for the board previously.
And just to let you know, the city controls the properties because they own the properties. The Aspen Country Inn, they are the general partner now of the Aspen Country Inn, and we're the limited partner. But they still own the land underneath it. The Truscott Phase 2 is for probably another 10 years. The Housing Authority is the general partner, and the city is a limited partner. But for Merolt and Truscott itself, the city owns them. The Housing Authority Board does own Smuggler Mountain Apartments, so you are seeing the budget that you do need to, you're approving all the budgets just because you oversee the program itself. But the ones that you basically control are the Smuggler Mountain Apartments and the APCHA Development Fund. And that's right now, the opening balance was 1.2 million. That, if you're not aware, years ago, a piece of property was left from the Benedicts for the Housing Authority itself, not the city, not the county, but the Housing Authority itself. When that property sold, it was 2/3 went to the Catholic Archdiocese and 1/3 went to the Housing Authority, and it was a little over $1 million. And the city the Housing Authority controls this. You own right now 2 pieces of property, which one is 1230 East Cooper and the other one is 106 Aspen Mountain Road number 107 Aspen Mountain Road number 6. It's a very small studio unit, which you are getting rent from both of those units. And you also purchased one of the Woody Creek units that are side by side that we're going to be redeveloping, and we hopefully will have them redeveloped, I'm hoping, by the end of next year, and we'll be able to market both those homes. One of them was bought through a foreclosure, which is funds that are in the budget from the city. It's $500,000 that it's budgeted for foreclosures. So we go to the courthouse steps when something's going through foreclosure, and we have the right of first refusal for that. So we find out what the debt is on that, and all the ones that we have bought over the years, and I'll tell you, from 1992 until for the last 10, 15 years, none of our units went into foreclosure. But then 1 or 2 kind of do. But we've been very lucky that after we got them, we were able to fix them up, and we either broke even or we made a little bit. Not a ton, but we made a little bit. And then we get a decent unit back in the inventory. With regards to the one unit that we're still working on with Burlingame, we're still going through a receivership on that. So you gave us approval to purchase that unit. That has not been done yet because we're going through the receivership on that property, which still is not going to happen until that's Robertson's unit at Burlingame.
That's
Yeah.
not in a receivership.
Oh, it's in the
Guardian.
guardianship.
A guardian ad litem has been
Right.
appointed for her. We did file, she got a notice of violation, unappealed, so we went to court for enforcement. And the judge determined that she needed a guardian ad litem, so that unit will kind of be in limbo for a while.
For a while.
Yeah.
So that unit has been sitting empty for a while. But hopefully sometime in 2024, that will be taken care of. So so when we do the budget process, we start the budget process fairly early. And the city pretty much says, this is the increase that you can do. And we have to stay within that increase. And I think it was 2 point something this last year, so it wasn't a whole heck of a lot. So the budgets themselves, we didn't get too much ground on that. But like Matthew was saying with the Housing and Administration Fund, the 620 fund, they did accept another position for us, and the city and the county approved that. So, so that's what the budget looks like. These are all the numbers for each of the budgets. I know the county has approved their budget, and the city has approved their budget as well.
And
So-
then you guys don't usually, I've mentioned it before, some of the capital improvements we're doing on the city-owned, we just did the stairs at Truscott. They're finishing up this week. We've got money to redo some of the grading at Truscott for next year. But I am excited, and I just wanted to highlight for 2025, we want to redo the playground at Truscott, which we're excited about. We've got some good bids in for that, and I think that's very important. Those are fairly small units, and I think it'd be fun for the kids to be able to play outside better. So we're going to move the playground, and we've got some good ideas what we're going to do that. So that'll be in 2025. So looking at you two.
So it feels like, and it felt like for 7-8 years I've been on the board, there's not much discussion here.
Yeah.
And I was going to move to approve resolution number 9, series of 2023.
Can I ask a question? Or after your motion?
Do it, you
Discussion?
can continue
Yeah.
discussion after the motion.
Okay.
Resolution of Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority Board approving the 2024 budgets for Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority Housing Administration Fund, Smuggler Mountain Apartments, Affordable APCHA Development Fund, Aspen Country and Affordable Housing, and Truscott Phase 2 Affordable Housing Fund. Okay.
I can second
Got a
that.
motion from John,
Second. Was there a second?
second from Allison. Okay, discussion.
I was just wondering where the hearing officer line item is. Is it other professional services?
It's under, I believe it's under
Administration.
compliance.
Okay. And all the legal fees
Is
for compliance?
basically
are-
under compliance as well.
Okay.
But they don't need to be spent.
No. And if we go to litigation next year, we'll probably have to ask for more, because
Yeah.
Tom's going to be busy. We have several.
It's all on the basis of what gets sent to me, and
Right.
it's hard to predict what's gonna happen, because most people will comply. They
just
get
like to
an
say that
NOV,
to
but
attorneys.
some don't. Huh?
I just like to say that to attorneys.
Doll doesn't
yeah,
have to be
good.
used.
That's not a
You
target.
don't have to.
No, I don't know what it is. I don't pay attention, so.
Really?
I just wouldn't, we might have a small, like, parks budget balance. Like, we had an impact fee a long time ago where we collected money for, like, like neighborhood park type of development. So, just keep that in mind and remind me when they're redoing the playground.
great.
at
Oh, that's
Prescott,
great to
and
know.
then we
Matching
might-
fund.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't,
really good
I
to
won't
know.
remember to come up with
great.
it, so, but if I tell you all, maybe you'll remember to ask us if we have money in that account.
It's really good to know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Allison?
So the additional staff member, that's coming out of
That's coming out of the
housing
city.
administrative, like when I'm looking at this chart,
How is that broken down? Yes.
We paid
housing administration fund.
Correct.
And I think
Oh, really?
in general, I agree with John that our role here is insanely performative, but, so I won't get too deep, but, so if our budget is 3.2, we're gonna spend 3.5, how are we up 439?
There's the carryover from the other fund.
Savings.
Opening balance with, and then we have a revenue budget, great. Yeah, I don't, really follow any of the line by line. It's not our money. It's not the four of us citizens sitting on this committee's money. It's, you know, the elected officials already say yes or no. I'm wondering if that even merits a revisitation of the IGA as far as like what our role is, why ask us basically, or if it's a pre-review. You know, like now that it's been stamped, what are you going to hear from me? Like I feel so inept right now. You know, like
when I go to the city and the county next year, I'd be happy to come do the same presentation as a professional courtesy to you guys, you know, even though we're not doing it, if you know, if that's what you would like.
Literally
Okay.
like the September, like here's what we're about to go with.
I can do that.
I'm so excited about the new position, and I think I was waiting for budget discussions to discuss it further. I do feel again like it's pretty irrelevant what I think or say, but for that to be HOA specific, I think it would be so great, you know, for that to be a little bit broader, or if that gets up and running, like you email HOAs, those are the one people we know who the exact point person is for every place. Like how can we use that role to then start getting really into that public engagement?
That's the plan. Yeah.
Okay.
So, real quick, you know, last night, board meeting, we're approving a hypothetical budget at that point, waiting on the mill levy distribution from our county assessor's office, or wherever it comes from. But we have to approve one because we really won't know that number until January, but we have to operate for 10 days or so until we, my question goes to city and county, or you guys, are these numbers hard in stone today?
Yeah. I mean, they've both been.
So we know, I mean,
they've been approved by both
tax
bodies,
collections
yeah.
are gonna be slightly different, right?
Yeah.
Based upon the
Yeah,
mill levies.
yeah. I mean, our budget was adopted and we will float our mill levy to match the budget.
Right.
And we won't know exactly what those mill levies are because of the
Like
changes in
January 6th or
assessment
10th or
until
something,
the
right?
time.
I mean, that's where we were too, as a fire board, but. Okay.
Questions?
Okay, it's a roll call vote.
Okay. John,
Aye.
Allison?
Yes.
Carson?
Yes.
Ward?
Yep.
And Kelly?
Yes.
Okay,
Adjourn?
no further items on the agenda.
I move to adjourn.
Right on time. Early.
Motion from John,
I've been motioning like crazy today.
I'll
second
second
from
adjournment.
Kelly,
Happy holidays.
The last
and it's a
board
roll
meeting
call
of the year.
vote.
Okay, I'm gonna go backwards. Kelly?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Carson?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
And John?
Aye.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned 6:30.